Shadow Slave. By Guiltythree. Chapter 1291, Perilous Gift. Shadow Dance was both the legacy of his aspect and a battle art Sunny had invented. That battle art was insidious, shapeless, and ever-changing. Its purpose was to steal that which made the enemy strong and use it to destroy them. The first step of Shadow Dance was the foundation of this ability. Sunny had mastered it during his bitter battle with Nephis, whom he knew all too well. It allowed him to peer into the very essence of the enemy's battle style and gain an almost supernatural understanding of what they would do, as well as the ability to mimic it. The second step was a continuation of the first. It was the same in all aspects except for scale. Assuming the persona of Mongrel, Sunny had battled countless awakened and absorbed their styles in order to make his ability more ubiquitous. He had mastered it during the final battle of the Dream Tournament, facing Morgan. That breakthrough deepened his understanding of the fundamental, governing principles of battle, which in turn allowed him to shadow unfamiliar and sophisticated battle styles much faster, and with greater ease. He also gained the ability to intuitively sense the unique ways in which his opponents utilized their soul essence to make those styles possible. The third step was different. It expanded on the first two, broadening the scope of Shadow Dance by redefining what a battle style was. Outwardly, that simply meant that Sunny had begun including nightmare creatures in the ranks of enemies he shadowed. Inwardly, however, the distinction was much greater. The third step had more to do with Sunny himself than with his enemies. After plunging into the alien and perverse minds of various abominations in the Red Colosseum, he still found himself falling short of an epiphany. That was because Sunny had to let go of his own sense of self to truly be able to shadow things that were innately different from him. He had to become more like the shapeless, formless shadows. He had managed to pass this impossible test because of the battle with Nightmare. The third mastery vastly broadened and improved his ability to shadow his enemies, as well as giving him the ability to perceive the flow of essence within them clearly. However, it also made Shadow Dance a double-edged sword. Sunny had found it easy to get lost in the form of an adversary, forgetting himself forever. The best defense against this risk was his true name, which served as the anchor of his soul. And now, there was the fourth step. It is even more dangerous. Sunny still felt the lingering remnants of the azure serpent paint his perception of the world. After delving into the form of the mad beast so deeply, he struggled to shake it off. The fourth step was also a continuation of the previous one. A logical progression that both completed and transformed the perilous gift of the third step. The third step was about breaking the rigid constraints of Sunny's mind to make it as shapeless and adaptable as a shadow. The fourth step was about allowing Sunny's physical form to follow suit. The key to mastering it was shadow manifestation. In the dreadful crucible of Antarctica, Sunny had invented Shadow Shell and Shadow Incarnation, which gave him all the tools he needed to reach the fourth mastery. But it wasn't until the battle with Darren of the Twilight Sea that he hammered all these elements together into a cohesive whole. Thinking about it, he shivered. Any form, any shape. The ability to not only grasp the essence of, but also become any creature he truly came to know. The prospect of such an ability seemed limitless. But so was its danger. What will I become if I use the fourth step a lot? There was an even more frightening question. If the fourth step of Shadow Dance was already so incredible and daunting, then what would the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh steps look like? Sunny felt that he needed to be careful, but he also knew that he was not going to let go of this power. He needed it. With a sigh, he thought back to the battle with Darren of the Twilight Sea and started going over every moment of it, absorbing the feeling of becoming a great serpent into his bones. With every minute that passed, he felt the moment where everything would click together, drawing closer. The waters of the great river were already dimming by the time Sunny opened his eyes. He let out a deep sigh and remained motionless for a few moments, contemplating his progress. I'm so close. It was probably a matter of days, a week or two at most, before he mastered the fourth step of Shadow Dance, and received the fourth legacy relic. Excited, Sunny wondered what it would be. A shadow. A memory. Or something else entirely, like another drop of ichor. Whatever it is. I hope Bloodweave doesn't gobble it up again. Suddenly bitter, he glanced at the horizon, and then hurriedly summoned the crown of twilight back. Soon, the seven suns rose from the depths and chased away the impenetrable darkness of the night. The dim twilight of dawn enveloped the catch for a brief period of time. At that moment, Sunny felt a flood of essence rush into his cores. Amazing. The rate of recovery was indeed greatly enhanced. Sunny had 5 shadow cores instead of 1, so it took 5 times as long for him to recover all his essence, without the aid of the Shroud of Dusk. With it and the Legacy of Twilight, though, it felt as though he would be able to replenish his reserves fully in the span of a single day. Half at dawn, and another half at dusk. If he was even slightly frugal, he would practically never run out of essence. Feeling encouraged, he glanced at the frail figure of Anank, then turned to Nephi's. Sunny silently pointed to the serpentine band of black metal on his head. It was time to ask more questions. Chapter 1292, History of Time. Nephi's nodded, indicating that she had read the description of the Crown of Twilight. The two of them could have communicated through the Blessing of Dusk to discuss how they would approach the conversation with Anank. But really, there was no need. The old woman showed no indication of being someone they needed to be wary of. So, they could simply ask. There was one question that had to be answered above all else, though. Sunny shifted slightly, then called, "Grandmother." Anank stirred, as if waking up from a dream, and looked at them with her cloudy eye. "Yes, my lord." Still uncomfortable with this form of address, Sunny thought for a moment and asked, "Have you ever heard about that which was defiled?" The old woman suddenly froze. Her hand, which was resting on the steering oar, trembled. For a while, nothing but the sound of water splashing against the hull of the ketch could be heard. It seemed that she wasn't happy to hear that question. However, Sunny and Nephi's had no choice but to ask it. They needed to learn everything they could about the assumed goal of this nightmare. Eventually, Anank sighed. That which was defiled. I guess you are talking about the defilement, my lord. Sunny's eyes glinted. The defilement. Remembering the horrors of the Southern Campaign, he made a sudden connection. There were 3 nightmare creatures he had slain that bore a similar name: the Defiled Witness, the Defiled Herald, and the Defiled Seeker of Truth. The first one was the fallen demon who led the pack of eyeless beasts. The second was the corrupted devil who led the group of desiccated corpses, their mouths sewn shut. Sunny had received the stifled scream after that battle. The third one was the fallen titan he had killed by chance during the joint battle against the enormous horde of abominations in East Antarctica, receiving the Mirror of Truth. Had all of them come from the tomb of Ariel? The old woman nodded. Yes. The defilement. I am sorry, my lord and lady. I should have known that you would not be aware of these matters. You are outsiders, after all. Sunny and Nephi's glanced at each other, wondering what she meant. Anank remained silent for a few moments, then spoke solemnly. To understand what the defilement is, you will first need to learn a little about the history of the Great River. I will try to explain as well as I can. Nephi's frowned slightly. The history? I am not sure I understand what history a river that flows through time can possess. The old woman smiled faintly. Time within the tomb of Ariel is unpredictable and convoluted. Sometimes, it flows slowly, while sometimes it flows swiftly. Sometimes, time rises in great storms, or grows stale, or circles forever as a whirlpool. Currents merge and separate, or disappear without a trace. But, nevertheless, for most of us, unless we enter turbulent waters, time always moves. Just like in the outside world. It is just that our own time is different from the time there. Noticing a hint of confusion on their faces, Anank looked thoughtful for a while. Then, she sighed, the best way I can explain it is like this: the great river does indeed flow from the future into the past, but that is only in relation to the outside world. Here, this kind of time is no different from space. However, the river still has a past, a present, and a future in relation to itself. Here, this kind of time is just like the time of the outside. Nephi's tilted her head a little. So, one can say that Sunny and I entered the tomb of Ariel in a distant future, meaning much higher upstream. But one can also say that we entered a month ago. Both distance and days are a measure of time. The old woman nodded. Indeed. You are wise, my lady. The corner of Sunny's mouth twitched. That's the second time she calls Nephi's wise. 0 times for me, though. Still, he understood the idea. There were actually 2 concepts named time inside the tomb of Ariel. One was the flow of the great river itself, which was prone to all kinds of shenanigans, while the second was no different from the concept of time they were familiar with. The old woman continued, "So, the great river has a history, as well. Or rather, it is us, the river people, who have it. That history started a long time ago, when the Sibyls first entered the tomb of Ariel with their people. There were others, too, all kinds of humans and creatures who came seeking truth, which is said to be hidden at the estuary." Her creaky voice grew wistful. "That was when we, heralds of the nightmare spell, came to the great river as well. I was told that it was a golden age. The Sibyls established their cities, and powerful seekers built solitary manors among the waves. They had escaped the end, and lived in peace and prosperity within the tomb of Ariel." Sunny found something curious and asked, "You were told? You weren't there yourself?" Come to think of it, when Anank had spoken about the persecution of the followers of Weaver, she had mentioned not experiencing it personally. That statement had sounded rather strange at the time, but there were many other questions that needed to be asked first. The old woman chuckled. "Goodness. Of course, no. I might look old, but I am not that ancient. No. I was born much later, after Weave was already established. Unlike those who have come from outside, like you, I am riverborn." Sunny made a mental note that there was a distinction between the outsiders and the riverborn, and continued to listen. Anank took a hoarse breath, then said somberly, "But that golden age. Eventually, it came to an end. First, the voices of the gods grew silent, causing the Sibyls to turn their gazes to the estuary. And then the defilement was born.